Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for being here to listen to this series and this particular episode of Adventures of the Awakened Heart. My name is Julie Tara, and I'll be your host. And the reason for this podcast is really because I felt compelled and called to bring forth stories from all the beautiful people that I know about the heart and the importance of the heart awakening and staying awake. So I'm really blessed today to be interviewing a great friend of mine, Ben Woodward. And let me tell you a little bit about Ben, and then we'll get started. Ben Woodward is the former global president of a multinational wellness company and is now an accomplished entrepreneur with an international business, alongside parenting 8 children with his wife, Kim. Yes, that is 8. Ben's repeated personal experience with family trauma and chronic illness have taught and tutored him with intimate insight. As the best-selling author of The Empowerment Paradox, 7 Vital Virtues to Turn Struggle into Strength, Ben has shared how we can find deep wells of personal strength, even amidst the most difficult of circumstances. He has worked with addiction recovery programs, youth organizations, and has also served as a lay minister for his faith. Welcome, Ben. I'm thrilled you're here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julie. It's such a pleasure. And I've really been looking forward to our visit today.
Me too. And we've been friends for a long time now. And we have the best conversations. I think I have the best conversations with you I have with anyone. So I'm really thrilled. And we're going to start this. I do have some set questions for you. And we're going to start first just to talk a little about the Gaia community. I'd love to know, like, as part of the Gaia community, what is the most impactful aspect of Gaia for you on your journey through life?
For me, the most impactful element or aspect is the broad spectrum of content that it offers. I feel like I can go there with a number of different questions across a number of different subjects and get meaningful answers. And I love, for me particularly, the favorite genre of subject matter is spirituality. That's an area that is very important to me. But what I find there is, especially as a parent, seeing my kids go off to school, there are set subjects that they get there that they are taught, and they aren't necessarily taught all of the material and information that is available in Gaia, in regards to having this very subject that we're talking about today, an awakened heart, and being aware of consciousness and identity and who we are and what we're connected with and levels that transcend what we're taught at school. So for me, as I look at it both as an individual and also as a parent, the subject material there and the breadth of it gets to some very root issues for my own journey of transcendence, my own journey of healing, recovery, transformation. That gets to the heart of all of those things for me, which is really important.
I couldn't agree more. It's almost like a university for the soul, I feel. And my favorite part is the spirituality part as well. So I've really noticed that I mean, actually listening to like even ancient civilizations too, and that sort of thing, and the history of humanity is just fascinating. And it is so broad. And I think it's good to keep a really open mind and a, really exploratory mind as we go through life, and not just take in what we take from school as the way it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really good point. So let's talk about your spiritual journey. How long do you feel you've been on this journey?
For me, it started when I was 14 years old. I was brought up in a home environment where faith was both taught and discouraged, which is an interesting scenario, because I had one member of my parentage who was active in a faith for a season. She stopped for a while, but became active when I was kind of in my just kind of entering my teens. But my stepfather was not, and he was quite anti-religion and was a real atheist with ferocity, is what I would say. So so he would often want to counter that, which was interesting because what it forced me to do was think for myself, choose for myself, decide for myself what is right. I've got two opposing views here on life after death, on the meaning of life, on purpose, of spirituality, the existence of spirituality, all these types of things, two opposing views. How do I respond to that? And so when I was 14, it's interesting. I'll explain why it became interesting, so interesting perhaps later on in our conversations. But I was visiting with my father, having traveled from New Zealand to the UK, and we got on the subject of life after death. And I thought, well, if there is, an eternal being, if there is a God, I would like to know that, because that would suggest within the existence of something, that within that existence comes meaning, and with that meaning comes purpose. And with that purpose comes responsibility. And I don't want to be detached from all of that. I want to be a part of that. So I went into my bedroom as a 14-year-old, having never done this really before, and just got down on my knees and asked the most basic of questions and just said, God, if you are real, I would really like to know. That was it. That was really the essence of my conversation. And I got this overwhelming feeling of love that entered my heart so strongly that it caused me to open my eyes and look around and go, what is this? And it was just a very clear, very strong, like I said, very, very strong response. I couldn't have created that for myself if I tried. Certainly not as a 14-year-old child who was going into that without any preconceived expectations, just kind of a wanting. And therein began my journey. From there, I stood up and I was like, okay, this is real. This is it. And my journey began from there.
It's such a beautiful story. And, as you expressed it, I felt it. I actually felt it. So, I feel like that really connects in with the whole idea here of the awakened heart is, this heart that is ultimately full of love.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very moving story. And I love the simplicity of it. It's sort of like, are you there?
Yeah.
It's so simple. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. I was just a kid, 14 years old. But the feeling of love was so magnificent and so strong. That in itself was instructive, really, wasn't it? That it wasn't just answering yes. There was an answer there that explained a little bit about who was answering me, who they were. What is he? This being that is responding means he knows that I exist. He knows what I'm doing right this moment. He knows what my concerns are. All of this was kind of coming about. There's a lot that you can peel back there and understand that when we ask and we get an answer, there is connectedness and concern that goes into that. And I think that is wonderful.
And clearly this has informed your life, because I know you fairly well, and I know that you come from love as much as you humanly know how, I would say, all the time if you can. And of course you're going to have your ups and downs because you're human like any of us.
Sure.
But it feels like you're on this journey of becoming, it's like the Teilhard de Chardin quote, we think we're human beings having a spiritual experience, but really we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. I feel like that's one of the reasons you and I are such good friends, because I always feel that you're coming from that perspective of being a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah, and I like, Michael Beckwith, who is featured a lot in Gaia.
Yes.
I love one of the things that he shares as well in one of his videos in Gaia, where he says, "You give to live until you live to give." Yeah,
Yes.
and that's that transformative process that we need to go through as well in order to fully embrace, that spiritual experience. So I like that.
Beautiful. I love Michael Beckwith. I actually met him doing a Gaia thing
Okay.
last summer, and I was so excited. And I was like,
Yeah.
we
Oh,
need to get
yeah.
you
He's
on Gaia.
fantastic. Yeah.
And then there he was. So I don't know if you want to capsulate what the awakened heart means to you. Do you have certain way of that you would describe that?
Yeah. I would sum it up in one word, and that is love. An awakened heart is one that knows what love is. And that is a progressive realization, I think, because my understanding of love now is very different to what I understood it to be 10 years ago, and is very different. That was very different to what I understood that love to be 10 years before. But I think love is at the center of creativity. It's at the center of creation. It's at the center of all spirituality. It's at the center of all of our connectedness, as not just as human beings, but of all living things. I think love is the central kind of binding force that makes everything come to its fullest realization of potential. So, yeah, love is it. And our task is to really understand, how can I love best? And that's the journey of the awakened heart for me. Is to be fully awakened, is to be fully cognizant of love in the moment. What does my life expect of me now? And this is one of the reasons why in my book I talk in some degree to suffering, because it's in those moments where we learn the most about love. Because the best response we can give to life is not in the easy moments, it's in the hard moments. And when things are tough, and we live in response to that toughness with love, with compassion, with mercy, with kindness towards others or the circumstances that we face, then we start to rise up to our full potential. Yeah. So that's where it really, I think, starts to awaken us. Otherwise, the tough things happen. We don't respond with love, and we fall flat. Whether we like it or not, time just marches onwards, doesn't it? And it's got its own speed, its own pace. We cannot pull it back. We cannot slow it down. We are just going along for the ride with it. And how we choose to react, it's like they say that time heals all wounds. But in reality, time also wounds all heals. If we can get our heads around that, yeah. Proverbial heels, the heels of our feet. All of us, as we go through this mortal journey, get hurt along the way. And the antidote of that, recognizing that will come, whether we like it or not, is to learn to love. And it's knowing how to do that in those moments where we really stand up and shine. As much as we wish that might not be the case. Yeah, if only it wasn't. If only, it was the ride back down the mountain that was what made us great. Actually, it's the ride up that makes us champions.
Wow, that is so powerful what you just said. And, we've never actually had that conversation before, but what you said about love connecting all things and being the sort of center point from which creativity comes and everything. I've always felt that my whole entire life. I remember my son coming from school talking about string theory in high school. And what is that? And he's like, and what does connect us all? And I was like, it has to be love. It just has to be love. I know it's love.
Yeah.
So, it's really interesting. And you touched on a lot there. Nassim Harriman was at the Gaia Sphere just 2 weekends ago and talked a lot about the physics of the multiverse. and ultimately said, you know, the whole thing is working toward your favor. It's all like cheerleading you on in your evolution. It's a benign, he kept saying over and over, it's a benign universe. And he'd get so excited about it.
Yeah.
It's a loving universe and multiverse. And
Yeah.
I just thought that he's, you know, proven that from a physics point of view, what we can know intuitively.
And this is the hard part, though, isn't it, Julie? Is even when there are facts, even when there is evidence that can quantify, measure, and confirm what you just stated, what we can feel to be true, our own sense of identity can get in the way. Our own beliefs about us interfere. So when we talk about love, you know, there are really two aspects to it. There is the flow of love that comes from my heart outwards to everything around me and everything that I'm connected with. But then there is the willingness and the openness for us to accept all of that love as it comes back into me. Yeah. And for many people, they're willing to give out the love, but they're not always willing to receive it, because they might go, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. Maybe if people knew that imposter syndrome creeps in, doesn't it? If people knew the real me, maybe they wouldn't love me as much. And that love, which is a gift, isn't really mine to have. Yeah, that opportunity that I crave, that aspiration or dream that I've got my heart set on, I really shouldn't. Yeah, so willing to give it out, but not always willing to receive it and take it in. And if we can take it in and absorb it, you know, that to me, when we learn to love ourselves with the same potency that we can love externally other things, then I believe our capacity to achieve greatness gets accelerated at paces and speeds that we have never met or come across before. I think that would be a huge awakening of our souls, you know, when that happens.
I think that's very well said and beautifully said. And I would say it's so funny because I love to love. I love to love. And sometimes I forget that it's like breath in and out. It's really wonderful to be loved, to feel that love coming fully in.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's a story here. And I'd love you to share, if you would, you know, one or two stories from your life about how this has shown up and how, you know, your heart has really opened to receiving and giving.
Yeah, well, I think it's, yes, let's trace back to that first story when I was 14, the feeling of love overwhelming. And in moments like that, as you move forwards, you look for opportunities to show love. Yeah, like you said, if you've got a big heart and you want to make others feel happy and to feel loved and appreciated, you want to give, you want to serve, you want to help. And it's a wonderful feeling. At the same time, I also think there are many instances, not always, where we do that because we also need to feel it ourselves coming back. And I think for me personally, there was an element of, I need to feel that love for myself, you know, coming back. And so sometimes I think that was a little bit of my motive that came in there. But a real mechanism for change came to me when I was in my early 20s. I'd returned, I moved from New Zealand back to the UK to visit my father. Ironically, interestingly enough, the last time I'd seen him was when I was that 14-year-old boy, where at his home, I had that moment of connection with divinity that sparked my awakened soul and got me moving. Yeah, I came back now much later. I was in my early 20s, 23. So, you know, it's a number of years later. I was 14, like I said, 14 to 23. I hadn't seen my dad during that time. So that was a long period of time where I hadn't had that father-son interaction. I came over on a one-way ticket full of enthusiasm to spend my time with him. And within a couple of weeks of moving in, I found out that he was guilty of some pretty horrific crimes, which he needed for his own best interest, as well as to to apply the laws of right and wrong in the universe, to apply them appropriately. He'd need to go to jail. And it's interesting. I shared this story. I don't want to go into all the details of what the crimes were and that type of thing, because that's less relevant to my point here. Needless to say, it involved victims, and there was abusive behavior and all that kind of stuff. It was not a pleasant, it wasn't just white collar crime stuff. Yeah. So I knew, if I was to throw myself horribly into those shoes, I would never have the courage to hand myself in, to start that process of redemption for my own mistakes. And I had to think to myself, what do I do here? I've spent all of these years, I know I was still only in my early 20s, but I had been very passionately devoted to expressing that love and striving to do what's right and be true to my beliefs and my faith and what have you. What do I do in this moment? How do I respond? What does love and an awakened soul, spirit, demand of me right now in this situation? And it demanded that I do what was right, not what was easy. That means I needed to facilitate my own father's arrest, testify against him in court. I even drove him to the courthouse to be sentenced when he had been convicted. He went to jail. He was there when I got engaged, when I got married, when I had my first child. He was there for quite some time. Now, why do I share this? Because we don't really learn what love is in the little moments when it's nice to give flowers. We've just had Valentine's Day this past weekend. It's nice to give flowers and chocolates. That's not really a meaningful expression of love. That's wonderful commercialism. Yeah, but it's not really much more than that. What does love really demand? To me, in this situation, it demanded everything from me. And this was a situation where love was my motive, not anger and resentment, not revenge or any type of desire to punish him in any way. I was devastatingly offended by his conduct, and it hurt me a lot, and it impacted me personally, because it shook my identity. I shared the same last name. I, had a similar frame and look about me and similar mannerisms, and I thought, and I didn't like that, and it conflicted with who I was, right? And in fact, I had a dear friend of mine say to me once, after all of this had gone on, and I was still kind of moving through my own journey with it. He said, "Ben, do you see yourself as a son of God, or as a kid that grew up on the wrong side of the tracks that just happened to get lucky?" What a profoundly important question that was. Yeah. Because my initial objective, like I said, was I wanted to do right on behalf of those that had suffered at his hands. And I felt an obligation and a duty to do that. I also wanted to do right by him so that he could end this life having put things right and made amends, and gone through his own redemptive journey as best as he could with the resources that he had, as best as he could. And I wanted to facilitate that and give it a kickstart, even though he might not have wanted it at the time. But there was a cascading effect that came from that was not just the mechanics of going through that process, but what do I do now emotionally with my relationship with him, with myself, and with others, right? And you might go, well, what's others got to do with it, or yourself? Well, let's go through these for just a second. With him, there's the obvious one. How do I maintain a relationship? What does that relationship look like? How do I craft that? What do I expect from it? How do I love him? What does love represent in a relationship like this? All of those difficult questions needed to be answered. I'm pleased to say that over a course of time, I got the answers, and I'm at a place now. I have no grievances towards him. I have no ill will towards him. I love him. I wish the very best for him. We have an appropriate relationship. It's not an ideal one, but it's the best under the circumstances, yeah, that you would expect. My relationship with myself, this was an interesting one, because I had gone on a journey where we're all taught this, aren't we? That if you really want to be free, if someone has hurt you or offended you, the best thing you can do is forgive them. Yeah. And we talk about that in the sense of, because it sets you free as well as them. Yeah. And if they choose to do nothing with your forgiveness, that's okay. That's not your concern, right? You have a responsibility to forgive regardless of what they do or do not do. There is another layer to it that is important that often gets overlooked. And that is, if you've had a situation like this that is chronic or enduring, maybe you've had a relationship with a parent, for example, that over a long period of time impacted you, like this one did with mine, yeah, with me, or with a spouse, with a loved one, or maybe with a child that's gone wayward in the wrong direction, yeah, and it's stretched out over a period of time. Why is time important? Because that chronic nature of it, that enduring nature of it, brings with it a different set of challenges. So this is the point that I want to make. It's not just about forgiving for the sake of letting go. There's another element, another component, and that is these situations will also start to define us if we don't let go. My sense of identity gets connected to those circumstances. So like my friend said, are you a son of God? Or are you just a kid that grew up on the wrong side of the tracks that happened to get lucky? You know?
Well, absolutely. So you're either become a victim of circumstance, or you know that you are blessed and supported, and that life is here to give and support and uphold you.
Yeah.
As you go through this. It is a huge quintessential question.
Yeah, it is. And so as the consequence of that, you've really got to study, who do I think I am? What relationship does that have with these external circumstances? Are they relevant or not? That's a big question. Are they relevant or not? And then moving on from that is my relationship with others. What's that got to do with this? Because if I'm going to stand up with moral character in a situation like that, how do I stand up and show up in life in other circumstances and situations? Do I have a different set of values? Well, I can't do, can I? I've got to be consistent. So as a consequence of that, when that scenario required me to really put my stake in the ground and go, I can't stand by as a passive observer of great tragic wrong and just do nothing. I've got to do something. Okay, boom, that carries on. Now, how does that affect me? Now, how does that affect my relationship with others? Now I've got to behave differently. And the interesting thing is, as a consequence of that, that required me to show up. I'm naturally more introvert in nature. I think I've learned to be a little bit more extrovert. I'm certainly not. My wife is wonderfully assertive. That's just her makeup, the way she is naturally. I'm not. These life events have required me to become assertive. But in leadership roles and in entrepreneurship, for example, as a consequence of those situations, I have learned to show up and be assertive and do what's right and get the job done. And as a consequence, it's yielded results in my ability to lead and in my ability to run businesses and in my ability to be an entrepreneur and in every other way that it could not have been without that tough scenario. So learning to forgive, learning to love, it's taken on a whole new breadth of meaning to me. And what facilitated it was incredible adversity. And yet what was required in those moments in every other situation since was a true connectedness to an honest expression of love and what that really means.
So, the visual that I'm getting as you're speaking this is, they talk about the pebble in the pond and then the ripple effect. But, what I'm seeing is like almost like this huge kind of rock, this boulder fell into your pool. And then, but the ripple effect was that much more powerful because of the severity of the impact of the nature of this situation with your father. And as we know, many of us have deep wounds from the father, sometimes also from the mother, sometimes from siblings, but very often when you really delve deep, you find that it's the devastation with the father that has catapulted somebody into a huge awakening, hopefully, if they haven't just shut down. And this is where the question is do we shut down around these things, or do we really open up and go, I can't stand this, and I'm going to become a better human being. It's such a powerful story, and it's clear how this experience has really changed how you are in the world. We could almost say, in a sense, it was a great blessing.
100%. I'm glad you said that, Julie, because that's exactly what I was about to say. Is I'm grateful for it. I hope my dad is. Yeah, I hope he is. I know he had to go through a tough journey of his own to get to where he is now. I'm not fully aware of where he's at because he's a closed book in many instances, and I respect his decision for that. But for me now, 100%, I'm grateful. It's helped me. If you were to say what's one of my biggest desires in life, is to be the best, most hands-on, engaged dad I can be. I want all of my kids to know that no matter what, they are loved and adored by their father. Yeah, and I tell all of them I love them every single day. There's not a day goes by that I don't tell them that, and kiss them and squeeze them and hug them and spend time with them. That to me is important. I wouldn't have gotten that if it wasn't for my father. And at the same time, there's been other requirements of me where I've had to stand up and learn lessons that I couldn't have learned without the wonderful instruction of suffering. It's painful and it's unpleasant, but it's our greatest tutor. And if there is to be meaning in life, there's got to be meaning in suffering. We've got to find that and be grateful for it. And I'm genuinely, I'm grateful that it happened. I used to look with a little bit of green-eyed envy when I was a teenager at some of my peers, at school, that, because I had that broken home environment. My stepfather, as I mentioned, was an atheist with, fierce vigor and enthusiasm, and he made life difficult for me sometimes. And I would look at some of my peers and I'd be jealous. And I go, I wish I had their advantages, their opportunities. And it turns out that my disadvantages were some of my best opportunities.
And would we all be able to say that? I hope that we would all be able to look back over our lives and reflect and say yes, or even in the midst of it, to say that this is a crucible, and out of this crucible, I will be the better for it. If I'm wise, because it takes wisdom to really reflect as you do. And we're both introverts, and so we do both reflect a lot, and we talk about that. And I think it's why our conversations are always so rich, because we do dwell in mindfulness and contemplation, and how do I view this, and what's really going on here. And here we are, this very a crucible, should we say, with what's been happening in 2020. Hopefully we'll come out of it more in 2021, but we're here at this crucible. You have these 8 beautiful children that you're loving and hugging, and and they're having to homeschool or do school online and all of this, and life has changed a lot for everyone. And I think this is one of the reasons it's so impactful. Like I know we feel like, oh, it's really hard and we're victims of it, but I keep thinking, no, there's something very, very good in here. There's some gold in
Yeah.
this mess. And so I want to ask you then about our future, because I think we're all looking at life in a very different way right now. And what is your heart vision for the future of our world? Because I feel we need creative leadership like never before in terms of heart vision.
Yeah. Yeah. I think heart vision for the world. Gosh, that's a huge question, isn't it? It's, again, we all need to learn. And I think this is what the pandemic is teaching people, is really just how connected we are and how connected everything is. Yeah. And I'm hoping that people are starting to learn it. There are people that are suddenly feeling disconnected, because they're quarantined, they're at home, they're furloughed, they're working from home, they're not going out. Maybe they've been very fearful to go out, even when there's opportunities where they can. They're too scared to, they stay in, and they're feeling, very frightened with what's going on. And there's a lot of people feeling disconnected. And I believe what this is teaching us is just how important that connectedness is. Yeah. And the string that binds us, that connectedness that binds us, again, is love. And we see it, maybe I would call it superficially, in the advertising that we see on commercials, where every major brand that's advertising on television right now has certainly changed its branding story, hasn't it, over the last 12 months in these challenging times. And we're with you till the end, as we always have been. And we get all of this similar vernacular, but they're trying to say something. They're all picking up on that same message that people want to hear, that we've all got each other's back. Yeah. And so how do we start that process? It starts with me. It starts with you. It starts with one person at a time, accepting personal responsibility. That's it. That's the way it starts. The interconnectedness we're seeing is more relevant than ever before, not just with humanity, but with every aspect of our lives. The economy is certainly more connected than ever before in the history of the planet. Our financial economy, and that can, as we can see, that could get brought to its knees very quickly with the likes of a pandemic. So we see just how fragile this environment is that we've created for ourselves. So surely that love and support that we can give each other and provide for each other becomes increasingly more relevant. And I love that there's a children's book by Jim Carrey that he wrote called How Roland Rolls. And it's about a little wave in the ocean that was worried that when he hits the shore, his life will be over. And he says, but as he's rolling, he gets struck with the notion that he's not just a wave, he's the whole big wide ocean. Yeah. And I love that concept, that's really what it's about. But we need to understand and expect that my personal responsibility to contribute is relevant, that if we are all interconnected, that means that includes me. It doesn't exclude me. I have responsibility here. And regardless of what I feel I can give, I have something. And whatever that is, be it big or small, that something matters. I think that's really important for people to understand. The heart message for the world, whatever you have, be it big or small, matters. We're all interconnected and we all play a part, and we all have a responsibility to show up and to do something, whatever that is, however we can contribute, we've got to do it. I'll conclude with this. The largest living organism on the planet, you've heard me talk about this before, the pando tree. It's a colony of trees in Utah, the largest living organism on the planet. We often think that the largest living thing will be a breed of whale of some kind. Yeah, it's not. It's a colony of trees. There's about 140,000 stems, but they all share one root system. And although each stem will live for about 100 years or so, the root system is about 80,000 years old. 80,000 years old, right? And what makes it so remarkable to me is, how has this become the largest, biggest, heaviest, oldest living organism? Because it shares a single root system. That's what makes it unique. It shares a single root system. So whether you feel like you're one tree in a mighty forest, and perhaps as that little tree, you're a sapling that's on the outskirts, and you're feeling the weather blowing against your back, and the wind is blowing, and you're feeling a little vulnerable. Understand, beneath the surface, you're connected to the oldest living organism in the planet. You're a part of that network, that system of interconnected roots that gives you thousands upon thousands of years of experience and strength and resources to nourish you and to help you grow. When we understand that, we start to realize that what we have to offer counts, even if I am that little sapling on the outskirts of the forest. So that, to me, is my vision for, the heart message for the world. Too often we think we're too small. We're not. We're all connected. And when we know that and we feel that, my part to play counts.
That's so beautiful, Ben, what you're saying. It touches me so deeply, because I do feel that so many just have low self-worth and don't think that they matter. And everything matters, because everything is part of that whole. And that thought of being part of that root system, it makes me think of the Native Americans, how they always speak about the ancestors and drawing on the power of the ancestors to come into the now and then lead us, into the future. And I've always loved that. I mean, we work together in other ways, and I've always loved the kind of interconnectedness of all of that. It has always thrilled me.
Yeah.
As it just such an example in business of how we can be that huge grove. Is it aspens? I can't remember. Is it aspen?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, aspen trees, which we have in Colorado, which I love, the aspens with their eyes, looking out at the world.
Beautiful, yeah.
Really beautiful. And I think it's so great what you're saying about the pandemic teaching us this, because you're absolutely right. Like, everyone is realizing. I mean, I talked to a lovely, beautiful friend of mine yesterday. She's just such a bright, joyful fairy. And she said, I never realized how much I loved hugging until I couldn't hug. And I said, oh, me too. I'm such a hugger. I love hugging people, and it's been so difficult to kind of have to hold back and be like, is it okay if I hug you? Are you all right with that? How we do this little dance that we're doing.
Yeah.
Because some people are okay with it and some people are not okay with it. And
that's right. Yeah.
That, So it was just a sweet commentary on that. And I think we're all seeing, and now we're using Zoom and we're doing more and more online things, but it's working. And I feel like so long as I can, if I can hear someone's voice or see them or see and hear, then okay, if I can't hug you, well, all right, we can't have that part of it, but we have the rest, and we need it so desperately. I was just this morning actually looking on Facebook. They're doing a whole new thing with groups, and I was reading about their whole new way of serving community, and whatever our individual ideas are about Facebook, it's certainly a very useful platform and can be, for community and YouTube and this sort of thing. And of course, Gaia and many other Nikken community, our communities are vital to our well-being. Absolutely vital. So, I know that you have a lot of other stories and we don't have time today. So I feel like we have to do that on another day.
Definitely.
Because they're so rich and you're so rich with wisdom and love. What would you leave our listeners with today, if you could leave them with one little sort of golden nugget? And I know that's really difficult because there's so much, wisdom that you have to share. But if there was one thing, what would that be?
Learn to be thankful. I think with whatever we struggle with, whatever bites at us, whatever we find is difficult that we might be working through, as we can learn to express gratitude and thankfulness in our daily lives, that will give us strength and capacity to heal, to recover, and to move forwards. And when the time is right, it's not always immediately, to find meaning in the adversity that we face. But learn to practice gratitude. I think that can be very, very transformative.
Absolutely, you are so right. The appreciation makes me think of heart math, and they always talk about breathing through the heart and then the appreciation for life, and that very thing connects us even more deeply.
Yeah.
The gratitude. So for all the good and all of what looks like it isn't good, and to go, this is all furthering the evolution of our world and of humanity. And I think we're at a juncture of a very, very, very exciting time, to be honest. I really feel, I always felt that I was called to come at this time to help usher in, more of a golden age, in some level or not, which I feel is this, really understanding our connectedness and loving one another. And I feel like it's coming. I was listening this morning to something called the hidden history of humanity, with a wonderful guy, Philip Lindsay, who's an amazing astrologer and goes way back in time and talks what was really going on in our history and bringing us up to the moment. And I feel like we are at this threshold of an extraordinary future if we get it, and if we keep awakening.
Yeah.
People, because it's not just, I awakened once. I always think it's funny when someone says, I awakened when I was 20. Well, I think it's an ongoing process. Yeah. Because we open and we close, like we breathe in and out. We have things happen and we do close down, but then we go into a deeper understanding and then come forth again.
Yeah, I like that. Awakening is like breathing. You don't expand or exhale once. You do it repeatedly. Yeah, it's progressive and it's constant. Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben, so much. You are really, honestly, one of my most treasured friends in my life. I'm so blessed and thankful to know you.
Thank you so much, Julie, and likewise. It's been a pleasure to be with you talking about this, and I feel the same. I could keep talking for hours.
It's gorgeous. And to all of you there, just know I will put the links and bio to Ben Woodward below. I will put the link to his book, of course, and his website. And also I'll put a link to Gaia. So please join our Gaia community, expand your thinking, expand your heart, expand your spirit. And I'm so grateful that you're here with us. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Adventures of the Awakened Heart. Many, many blessings to all of you. And to you again, Ben, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.